Hey, I've been looking through these 50 multiple-choice questions for the 04729 University Chinese Self-Study Exam. They cover a huge range, from classical poetry and prose to modern literature and basic literary knowledge. Let's dive in and discuss some key ones, focusing on how these works function in practice, their rhetorical mechanisms, and cultural significance, rather than just memorizing facts. They do cover the main pillars reasonably well, but you're right. Too many stay at the level of, what is the core/fundamental primary phrasing? Still, several questions do point toward real governance mechanisms. Take question 17 on supply-side structural reform. Asking about the core objective being improving supply quality is one of the better ones, because it forces students to move beyond GDP obsession toward the actual policy logic of cutting overcapacity, reducing costs, deleveraging, and lowering market barriers.
Exactly. And that ties directly into question 11 on high-quality development. The correct emphasis on meeting people's growing needs for a better life is crucial, because the mechanism isn't just about slower headline growth. It's about shifting evaluation criteria from quantity to quality, efficiency, and fairness. In practice, this means changing local officials' KPI systems so they no longer chase projects with high pollution and low added value.
Precisely. Another mechanism-oriented question is 4PD on high-level opening up. The contrast with self-sufficiency or trade protection highlights that China is deliberately choosing deeper integration into global value chains while simultaneously protecting strategic sectors. Dual circulation isn't isolation, it's using domestic demand as a stabilizer while expanding high-standard opening in rules, regulations, and negative list management.
I like how question 18 on the overall national security concept appears. In classrooms, we sometimes only mention political security, but the question correctly presents the holistic view: political, economic, military, cultural, social, sci-tech, ecological, etc. The practical mechanism here is the creation of the National Security Commission and the subsequent proliferation of domain-specific security strategies and risk assessment mechanisms across ministries.
Yes, and that connects to question 28. Political security being listed as the foundation. In operational terms, this means that all other security work must ultimately serve the stability of the party's ruling position. You see this concretely in how cybersecurity laws, data security laws, and counter-espionage regulations are framed. Protecting core political interests comes before purely commercial considerations.
Question 44 on whole process people's democracy is interesting because many students still think democracy equals elections every 4 years. The question pushes them toward understanding institutionalized mechanisms, legislative hearing systems, policy consultation before major decisions, online opinion solicitation platforms, deputies, contact stations, and the expanded use of democratic deliberation at the community level.
Agreed, but I wish there were more questions on how that whole process mechanism actually constrains power. For example, question 29 on comprehensive and strict party governance is important, but it stays abstract. In reality, the mechanism includes the placement of discipline inspection commissions at every level, regular political inspections, gunshots, the lifelong accountability system for major decisions, and the integration of party leadership into corporate governance in state-owned and even many private enterprises.
True. Question 19 on maintaining party purity through discipline is another one that could have been more mechanism-focused. The practical channel is the combination of tigers and flies, anti-corruption, the 4 forms of supervision and discipline enforcement, and now the increasing use of big data and AI-assisted supervision to spot abnormal fund flows and lifestyle inconsistencies early.
Let's talk about rural revitalization. Question 15. The strategic goal is modernization of agriculture and rural areas, but the real mechanisms are quite diverse. Targeted poverty alleviation transitioning into preventing return to poverty, rural collective property rights reform, integration of agriculture with secondary and tertiary industries, e-commerce for agricultural products, and the massive land consolidation and high-standard farmland construction programs.
And don't forget question 26 on grassroots governance. The mechanism emphasized is party leadership plus mass line work plus modern tech. You see grid management, Snowbright project, surveillance, points-based resident credit systems in some places, and the professionalization of grid workers who are now salaried and report both to the village party branch and township government.
Question 27 on science and technology's self-reliance is probably one of the most consequential. The practical mechanisms include massive R&D budget increases, the revealing the list and taking the lead, Dengxin Uruguay, system for critical technologies, the creation of national laboratories, and the chain master responsibility system where leading enterprises coordinate upstream and downstream innovation.
I also appreciate question 20 on building a community with a shared future for mankind. In diplomatic practice, this translates into concrete mechanisms: the Belt and Road Initiative's project financing and standards cooperation, the Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, the expansion of RMB cross-border usage, and active participation in setting rules for digital economy, climate governance, and AI.
One last point. Question 49 names the central task as leading the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. That phrase is abstract, but the mechanism cascade is quite clear. Party leadership, right-pointing arrow 5-sphere integrated plan, right-pointing arrow 4-pronged comprehensive strategy, right-pointing arrow new development philosophy, right-pointing arrow Chinese-style modernization, right-pointing arrow national rejuvenation by mid-century. The whole course is basically an elaboration of that logical chain.
Well summarized. Overall, the 50 questions are solid for testing basic command of the discourse. But if we want deeper understanding, future exams should include more scenario-based or mechanism-tracing items. How does X policy instrument actually work in practice? That would better reflect how Xi Jinping thought is not just a set of phrases, but a living governance system.
Completely agree. Good discussion.
One area I think the questions could probe more deeply is the actual institutional design behind people being masters of the country in question 6. In practice, this isn't just a slogan. It's operationalized through several interlocking mechanisms. The most visible is the People's Congress system at all levels. But the real leverage comes from the combination of deputy proposals and motions, supervisory powers over budgets and appointments, and increasingly from the Standing Committee's right to question senior officials in closed-door sessions.
You're right, and that supervisory function has been strengthened considerably since around 2018. Another under-discussed mechanism is how the United Front Work Department coordinates with mass organizations, trade unions, women's federations, youth league, federations of industry and commerce, to channel non-party elite and social group opinions upward. It's a parallel feedback loop that supplements the Congress system rather than replacing it.
Good point. Speaking of coordination, question 32 on coordinated regional development strategy deserves more attention in exams. The mechanism isn't merely fiscal transfers anymore. It now includes cross-provincial joint party government leading groups, e.g., Xinjiang, Yangtze River Delta, Greater Bay Area, unified market rules for negative lists and environmental standards, and infrastructure connectivity planning that overrides purely provincial interests.
Exactly. And the political mechanism that enforces this is the central leading group/commission system. Almost every major cross-regional initiative now has a central leading group chaired by a Politburo Standing Committee member. That gives it binding authority across administrative boundaries, something that didn't exist at this scale before the new era.
Let's talk about question 25 on common prosperity. Many students still interpret it as redistribution only, but the practical sequence is first enlarging the pie through high-quality development, then improving how the pie is divided via progressive taxation, third distribution, voluntary corporate and individual giving encouraged by honors and policy, and targeted policies for low-income groups, rural revitalization, education equalization, medical insurance expansion, housing security reforms.
And don't forget the income doubling plans that are now tied to common prosperity indicators. Some provinces have already started publishing Gini coefficients and income ratio metrics, top 20% to bottom 20%, as part of annual performance evaluations. That's a very concrete accountability mechanism.
Question 12 on ecological civilization is another one where the mechanism has evolved dramatically. We moved from apportioning pollution quotas to a sophisticated system. River/lake chiefs and forest chiefs at every administrative level, ecological red lines legally protected in the Land Spatial Planning Law, the national carbon market with expanding coverage, eco-compensation transfer payments between upstream and downstream provinces, and green performance-linked loans for banks.
The river/lake chief system is especially interesting because it personalizes accountability. Every body of water has a named official responsible, and failure triggers discipline inspection. That's a very Chinese way of combining top-down pressure with localized enforcement. It's similar to how the targeted poverty alleviation campaign used First Secretary Unchura mechanism to ensure implementation at village level.
Speaking of which, question 16 on talent being the primary resource ties into several mechanisms. The talent work leading groups at every level, the National High-Level Talent Special Support Plan with direct central funding, household registration and children's education incentives in major cities, and now the aggressive global recruitment through Thousand Talents, Young Thousand programs. Even after name changes, it's no longer just policy rhetoric, it's backed by very large budgetary commitments.
True. One final observation, question 37 on cultural confidence being rooted in fine traditional Chinese culture. In practice, this manifests in the massive state-supported revival of traditional rituals and classics in schools, DIOT programs in some places, the protection and utilization of intangible cultural heritage for tourism and soft power, the integration of Confucian values into socialist core values propaganda, and the deliberate promotion of Chinese excellent traditional culture in international communication, e.g., Confucius Institute's 2.0 style.
And all of that is coordinated by the Central Commission for Deepening Overall Reform and its many special subgroups. Almost every major policy area now has such a subgroup that meets regularly, sets timetables, and tracks progress with third-party evaluations. That meta-mechanism, centralized coordination plus timed targets plus accountability checks, is probably the single most important operational innovation of the new era.
I think that's the key takeaway. The questions are useful for vocabulary, but real mastery comes from understanding how Xi Jinping thought translates into these interlocking institutional arrangements, performance systems, and enforcement mechanisms. Maybe the next edition of the textbook or exam should include more case studies or trace the mechanism questions.
Fully agree. This has been a productive exchange, thanks.
Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to question 43 on the primary goal of ecological governance being sustainable development. The mechanism that really drives this in practice is the one-vote veto system for ecological red line violations in cadre evaluations. If a local leader allows a project that crosses the red line, even if it brings huge GDP, the annual Cocker key directly fails them. That single mechanism has probably done more to enforce ecological discipline than any number of speeches.
Absolutely. It's paired with the Central Environmental Protection Inspection Teams, Chuo Haiho Sengsats, that can go straight to provincial and municipal party secretaries. Those teams don't just write reports. They can trigger organizational adjustments and even transfers of cadres. The 2016 present round of inspections has already led to disciplinary action against thousands of officials. That's real teeth behind the belly. Lucid waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets. Line.
Another mechanism worth highlighting is in question 41. Education's fundamental and strategic role. Beyond funding increases, the practical lever is the integration of Xi Jinping thought into the compulsory national curriculum from primary school through university. The establishment of Xi Jinping thought research centers in major universities, and the requirement that all party school and cadre training programs allocate at least 30 to 50% of class hours to the thought. It's a long-term ideological reproduction mechanism.
Yes, and that dovetails with question 30 on socialist core values. The mechanism isn't passive propaganda. It's embedded in everything. Civil servant recruitment exams, professional title evaluations, corporate social responsibility reporting for SOEs, village rules and family instructions in rural areas, and even the content guidelines for online platforms and short video algorithms. It's a full-spectrum value guidance system.
Question 14 on holistic governance. K. Shirdi is another sleeper hit. In practice, this means moving away from siloed departmental handling toward cross-departmental command centers for major issues, whether it's COVID response, flood control, or now AI governance. The mechanism usually involves a leading small group or commission at the central or provincial level that can override normal bureaucratic boundaries and assign hard targets with monthly progress reporting.
Speaking of which, question 36 on coordinating reform, development, and stability is probably the most philosophically loaded, but also the most operationally consequential. The practical rule of thumb since the new era has been bold in breaking new ground, steady in implementation. You see this in the sequencing. Pilot programs first, free trade zones, Hainan FTP, Xianggun, then replication after evaluation, and only then nationwide rollout. That controlled experimentation mechanism reduces systemic risk while allowing bold moves.
Exactly. And question 39 on building a modern economic system ties into that. The core mechanism isn't privatization or full marketization, it's market plays the decisive role, plus better government's role. Concretely, this means negative list management for market access, fair competition review mechanisms before new regulations, mixed ownership reform that keeps state capital dominant in strategic sectors, and industrial policy 2.0 focused on new energy vehicles, lithium batteries, photovoltaic, and future industries like humanoid robots and quantum tech.
One more. Question 45 on the active defense strategy for national defense. In practical terms, this has translated into accelerated modernization of the PLA, theater command reform, joint operations command structure, rocket force expansion, carrier strike groups, anti-access/area denial capabilities in the near seas, and now far seas protection missions for Belt and Road projects. The doctrinal shift is from winning local wars under informatized conditions to winning informatized and intelligentized wars, with very heavy investment in military-civil fusion to accelerate that.
And underpinning all of it is question 33. Upholding the party's overall leadership. The most visible mechanism is the party managing cadres principle extended to every important position. SOE executives, university presidents, hospital directors, even heads of major private tech firms in strategic areas now require party committee approval or have party branches with real authority. It's the ultimate safeguard mechanism for alignment.
I think we've covered most of the high-impact ones. Overall, these 50 questions do a decent job of mapping the conceptual landscape. But the real educational value would come from follow-up assignments that force students to explain, how does this concept actually get implemented, through which specific institutions and tools? That would turn rote learning into genuine understanding of a living political system.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for the thorough back and forth. It's sharpened my own thinking about how to teach and research this material.
Likewise. Until next time.